So in 2021, because of the one-sided decisions by the Higgs government to not say outlaw abortions at private clinics, but to limit them through various machinations, is going to be in the news for at least a few more years to come until it's rectified. The Charter protects the situation for those wishing to have an abortion. But we're going to talk about a little bit of history of the weird, what they call legal ramifications of abortion across New Brunswick and Canada over the years. Now, at one point, it was illegal to have an abortion, and it was part of the criminal code. Now, in the 1920s, there was a major shift in these type of what they call unregulated operations. Now, as we all know, in 1969, the Canadian Parliament amended the criminal code to authorize hospital committees to approve therapeutic abortions on a case-by-case basis. Now, information on this subject is taken again from our great friends, University of New Brunswick.ca, the St. John historical website that talks about aspects of crime and punishment. Now, by 1970, the first reporting year, 11,200 abortions were carried out in Canada. Prior to 69, abortion had been a serious criminal offense, punishable by life in prison. Now, abortion and dissemination of birth control had been made illegal in Canada's criminal law from 1869 to second year of Confederation. Despite this, women who wished to terminate pregnancies prior to full term resorted to a range of methods. Women had access to traditional methods, as well as abortion medicines advertised in newspapers and sold in local drugstores. Now, historical research shows that despite the image from popular fiction and newspapers that the typical woman seeking abortion was a cliche, including poor, young, and single, or a domestic servant, many were married and older. By the early 20th century, it was estimated that tens of thousands of women were undergoing illegal abortions each year, and that hundreds were dying from botched procedures. Now, most abortion cases never came to the attention of the authorities in New Brunswick, but when they did, community interest, like 2021 about the abortion battle, was intense. At the same time, public decorum limited the amount of sensitive medical and their shocking detail released to the public. Such was the case with the trial of a Mrs. Bessie Parker of St. John in 1923. According to the police, Parker, who was a daughter of a policeman, had performed a criminal operation on a young woman, Emily Frontin, who later died in the hospital. Frontin had made a dying declaration in hospital where she detailed what had allegedly happened. The statement was witnessed by St. John's police magistrate, and before she passed away, the victim identified Parker, who had been brought to the hospital, as the person who had performed the procedure. By the time she came to trial, the middle-aged woman had spent more than 100 days in jail. The case of Frontin contains echoes of other women in trouble stories in early 20th century newspapers. But how did she meet Bessie Parker? Now, Parker, according to published reports, ran a boarding house on Main Street in St. John's Indiantown neighborhood and earned extra money from sewing. Although married for 2 decades, she had been separated from her husband for a few years. She also provided maternity nursing to expectant and new mothers, which suggests that cities such as St. John were places where women went to give birth in a more anonymous setting. I tend to agree within my own family, but that's another case for another time. Now, even in mid-sized cities such as St. John, women who wish to end a pregnancy prematurely turn to drugs and advice from midwives, doctors, and baby farmers, women who operated nurseries for infants. Those who gave birth to unwanted babies relied on private charities such as Roman Catholic and Protestant orphanages or their own networks of family and friends to find a home for infants. In St. John, the Sally Ann, which specialized in social outreach to the vulnerable, operated a maternity hospital in recognition of the social program of young, single, and poor women giving birth in the city. Now, the Catholic Church operated the Home of the Good Shepherd, an orphanage that doubled as an institution for wayward girls. Now, other cases reported in the newspaper suggested a network of informal support service for pregnant women, some of which operated on the wrong side of the law. One of these shady practices was baby farming, where women, often single or poor, left infants in the care of other women for short periods or indefinitely. In many cases, these unfortunate babies died of unknown causes, which suggested foul play. In other cases, they were reunited with their mothers of adopted, or they may have been abandoned to the elements, as was the case with a baby found in a dump along the shore of Courtney Bay in the St. John region in 1909. Evidence suggested that the baby had been alive at birth and the mother had been assisted by a woman, not a doctor. Now, getting back to the murder trial, it began in 1923. It was alleged that Parker performed an abortion by using a knitting needle. From our modern perspective, the trial contains interesting gender perspectives on both the accused and the victim were women, but women in New Brunswick, despite having acquired a right to vote, could not sit on juries. Frontin had visited Parker's house in St. John's North End in the summer of 22 and informed her that she would require assistance with her expected baby in a few weeks. At this time, Mary had lived with her sister and worked for NBTel, or the Brunswick Telephone Company. Parker insisted that Frontin had claimed that the father of the child was a married businessman and that she planned to travel to Montreal, where she would put the baby up for adoption. Parker also claimed that he assumed that the couples who came to her boarding house for help were married. According to the victim's sister, a male friend named William Ferris had been the cause of her trouble. Ferris allegedly had met Mary at a dance 3 or 4 years previously. He admitted to have given the victim $40, but testified he had no knowledge of her condition or intention. Now, Frontin, on the advice of Dr. MacDonald, had been admitted to the hospital in September 22, where she treated for typhoid. MacDonald had suspected septicemia, blood poisoning. Unfortunately, this crucial information was not conveyed to the hospital authorities. Dr. MacDonald later testified that his patient had told him that she had gone to a woman in the North End. 3 days after, Frontin was admitted to the hospital, and doctors became aware of her true condition and attempted surgery. Unfortunately, the patient died on October 2nd, 22, according to a post-mortem performed by the provincial pathologist from an internal puncture, or pretty well what he called liquid or internal bleeding. Now, Parker's trial for murder was marked by heated exchanges between the Crown and the defense, a Canadian senator. Complicating the situation was the fact that the original copy of the victim's dying statement had disappeared from the desk of the police magistrate. At the trial, 4 doctors, including one of the city's few women physicians, testified. The testimony of Mary's sister was confusing. In one section, described how her sister had given birth in a room and had wrapped up the baby and placed it behind a trunk. Later, she recalled how Mary had gone to Mrs. Parker, who had performed a brief procedure on her. Now, the defense called one witness, Parker, who disclaimed any knowledge of a knitting needle discovered by police behind a wallboard in her kitchen, and explained that she only lived in the house for a few months prior to the events under the court scrutiny. Parker testified that the girl had been seriously ill when she arrived at her home. She claimed that she had been involved in roughly 50 maternity nursing cases and had often helped girls who had no money. Now, legal history research suggests that in cases of abortion and infanticide, juries were often reluctant to convict on charges of murder. In the case of infanticide, authorities responded to low conviction rates by substituting a lesser charge of concealing the birth of a child. Now, as the judge explained to the jury in the Parker trial, with abortion prosecutions, there were 3 possible verdicts: a conviction for murder or manslaughter, or an acquittal. In this case, the all-male jury, after deliberating for several hours, was split. 8 members wanted not guilty, and 4 conviction for manslaughter. The case against Parker was dismissed. Now, the tragic case suggests that although the criminal law and society's official morality in theory treated those who sought or assisted with abortions in a severe fashion, in practice both the justice system and society in general responded to in an ambivalent manner to this social problem. Now, information for this article was taken from Kristen Johnson's Kramer talking about infanticide, called Unwilling Mothers, Unwanting Babies, published in UBC Press 2005, and of course Carolyn Strange, Toronto's Girls' Problem, The Perils and Pleasures of the City, 1880-1930. Carolyn's a very good writer. I've read her stuff before. Very, very good researcher. And this was, of course, published by University of Toronto Press in 1995. But butterbox babies basically adopted where someone is brought in if the mother is young enough, like a cousin or aunt. It was not talked about. Illegal pregnancies, what they call romantic pregnancies, where the the housekeeper gets pregnant by the house owner or the landlord. Very freaky times. In 2021, abortion is not really talked about other than a right. There's not a bunch of women around the table saying, where do you go for an abortion? It's still, for a lot of people, the religious stigma, the mental stigma, the disposability of a living life. I'm pro-life, but I don't think it's right for me to tell another person how to deal with a situation, because each individual in this life has a life to live, and if they make choices, say like George Jones, you live and you die with the choices you make. So one bad evening should not be a death sentence for the rest of their lives. If a woman gets pregnant and can't have the baby, it's her decision, it's not mine, and that's the way it goes. But to criminalize something that's human nature, because if a girl got horny and slept with somebody and had no birth control, got pregnant, I mean, that's biology, that's not criminality, in my personal opinion. But anyway, I don't make the laws. If I did, I basically say, don't ask me to make the laws, because there's a value system, is what I'm saying, is very important. You can make a mistake and apologize, but why would you send somebody to jail for literally a 1 second mistake where the ovum meets the sperm? Makes no sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing with our real crime or true crime podcast, let us know. Give us a like, comment, or subscribe. And don't forget, check out these UNB criminal history websites. It's quite interesting. And since my tax money pays for a lot of these universities, I produce it, so check it out. Have a good day. Bye.